Let's see, can I do it this way? Hi guys. Let me check the sound check here. I'm going live. I didn't do any notifications, so I'm turning it up. And if you want to turn it down, you can. This is Pearl Dan here. I'm going to read a book story time to you guys. The Courage of Sarah Noble by Alice Dalgliesh. I'm hoping I say her name right. Pronouncing it right. Dalgliesh. It's an old book. Again, one of my books I've had since I was a little girl. Bookworm I was, and still am. I'm going to get started in a second here. I'm trying to make some adjustments so I don't keep hitting the fix the thumbnail thing. Give some people time who are new to my channel, taking a look at it. I had a video too about UFOs on there from over a year ago or last year, in September. So it might be on my channel somewhere. I don't know, unless YouTube took it down. That's why I can't find it. But it was in Signal Hill, California. I'm wearing a hat because my hair, and it's my hair. It's all my real hair. Yes, it's mine. But I'm wearing a hat because it's cold in my house. I don't have heat in my part of the house. That's why I'm all bundled up a little bit. And I don't know. I just felt like wearing my hat today because I was outside earlier. My dog, one of my dogs, excuse me, got out the gate yesterday. Apparently, my eldest son took some old things outside, like my bike, because it's broken. You have an accident on the bike and then it's like you can't use it anymore. So he took that, some other things outside, and I guess the back gate didn't close all the way. He locked it. Either someone came by and tried to take the gate itself, the door, because it's metal, and they realized the dogs were there, and the dogs, swooped in, and my big dog got out, and we're out since after 4 o'clock yesterday evening looking for him. So I was looking for him all the way until 4 a.m. I'm just like, I just need to get some sleep. Woke up this morning, a couple hours later, got a phone call. Hey, just before my sons went to church, and the local animal control person called me. I'm so grateful to her because she had my dog. And apparently, when my youngest son, Jacob and I went walking, looking in the neighborhood for our dog last night, we didn't go an extra block further down, and that's where he was, the next block over in someone's apartment building on the second floor, according to the animal control agent, and he didn't want to come off the porch. So, and since then I changed my number, so I think he was at my friend's house down there, one of my clients. So, oh well, he's home. Yay, we're happy to have him back because I was just like praying and really upset that he was gone. That's our baby. Okay, so I'm going to read to you The Courage of Sarah Noble by, again, Alice Dalgliesh. For those of you who are just joining in, if you're catching on. If not, then you can catch it on the, after I live stream it, you can still watch the video. So far, my son, who's 13, Jacob, is saying I'm doing pretty good. So I'm hoping that you are enjoying the stories too. And also, when I read my voice, I do different characters sometimes, but also I have an accent when I read. There's nothing I can do about it. It comes and goes while I'm reading. So hopefully it's not too annoying to you guys. All right. I have my ice. I like to drink my ice water with a little bit of lemon in it. I'm always thirsty, and I'm going to get started, okay? All right. And if you hear cats in the background, it's probably one of the kittens that came to visit outside. Okay. All right. So The Courage of Sarah Noble, and it has some illustrations in here. Illustrations by Leonard Weisgard, Scholastic Book Services. So kids, reading is fundamental. It's not a story that grown-ups want to just tell you. It is good to read books. I mentioned in another video that my youngest son Jacob had to read over 100 books at his elementary school, before he graduated or got promoted from 5th grade. And he read over 100 books. Already we had books here, but then I found the thrift stores, other stores around that had where you get books for $1 or 25 cents. I invested in getting more books for him. I think I got multiple of what we already have. But it's important that you read because it helps you understand what people are saying and what you're reading in other books or at school, reading, it helps you comprehend what's going on. So hopefully you get something out of it. A lot of the stories that I will be reading do have some moral things to them, moral and ethics. I'm big on that, especially with my kids. I always teach my boys to be a man of good character and strong integrity. That's very important to me, that they know that. And so far they've been established with that and displaying it to other people. I get excellent feedback from not just church members, but from people that just know them outside of church, outside of, school, wherever they go. I always hold them to, being a good person, good, strong character and integrity. I'm really big with that, like I said. And my eldest son, I get nothing but good word from anyone that he's come in contact with about how he behaves himself. And he's 27. Am I dating myself? I am. But I'm proud of him. He's being a good young man, and he's newly married with his beautiful wife. This year they've been together since high school for more than 10 years. So on their 10th anniversary, they got married. So I'm so proud of them both. They're beautiful people. And my youngest son, Jacob, is such a sweet boy. He loves giving me hugs. So I'm enjoying and embracing the hugs. So if you love giving hugs to your parents, keep giving it to them, even if you think they don't want it. They're just playing, like, oh, I don't want a hug, but they really do enjoy the hugs because they know that you're growing up. And we just don't want to, sometimes as parents, we want you to grow. And then sometimes at the same time, we don't want you to, what's the word for it? We try to downplay how we feel, but I'm jumbling around with it, but I think you might get what I'm saying and get the gist of what I'm saying. But we love our kids. Parents, we do love our kids. Okay, good parents. I don't know about the bad parents. Pray for them. Okay. All right, here we go. Ready? Okay. For the children of New Milford who are proud of Sarah Noble. Okay. Oh, I do want to read this part to you because this is interesting. Okay. And just to give you a heads up about Sarah Noble, copyright was 1954. However, there's a notation in here. If you ever Google this book and find it, it says here, this is what I'm going to read to you. It says here, romance has never painted a picture more perfectly true to the heart of a father or to the charming bravery of a young daughter, only 8 years, than is found in the history of the settlement of the first family in the beautiful township of New Milford. History of the towns of New Milford and Bridgewater, Connecticut. The years are 1703 through 1882 by Samuel Orcutt. Wow. History in the book. Okay. Here we are. There's the father and there's the daughter, Sarah. Okay. So I'm going to, in between reading, I will show you the pictures, okay, which are also called illustrations. All right. Chapter 1. Night in the forest. Sarah lay on a quilt under a tree. The darkness was all around her, but through the branches she could see one bright star. It was comfortable to look at. The spring night was cold, and Sarah drew her warm cloak close. That was comfortable too. She thought of how her mother had put it around her the day she and her father started out on this long, hard journey. Keep your courage, her mother had said, fastening the cloak under Sarah's chin. Keep up your courage, Sarah Noble. And indeed, Sarah needed to keep up her courage, for she and her father were going all the way into the wilderness of Connecticut to build a house. This was the first night they had spent in the forest. The other nights they had come to a settlement. Thomas, the brown horse, was tied nearby. He was asleep on his feet. Against a tree, Sarah's father sat, his musket across his knees. Sometimes he nodded. But Sarah knew that if she called to him, he would wake. Suddenly, she had a great need to hear his voice, even though she could not see his face. Woohoo! Such a strange sound from a nearby tree. Father! An owl, Sarah. He's telling you good night. Another long, louder sound, a stranger sound, as if someone were in pain. Father! A fox, Sarah. He is no bigger than a dog. He is calling to his mate. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to sleep. Then came a sound that made her open her eyes and sit right up. Father! Yes, Sarah, it is a wolf. But I have my musket and I am awake. Woke him up 3 times. I can't sleep, Father. Tell me about home. What shall I tell you, Sarah? Anything, if it is about home. Now the howl of the wolf was a little farther away. Do you know how a wolf sounds? Woo! The owls go, woo-hoo. Fox goes, Chapter 2. Before I go on, as I read the stories to you, use your imagination. Your imagination is your mind, your dreams. Just close your eyes, and if you can take in my voice, just listen to the words and how the story's flowing, okay? All right, here we go. Chapter 2. Night in the settlement. The next night was quite different. They came at sundown to a settlement. The houses were brown and homelike. In 2 of them, the sticks of pine used instead of candles were already burning. They shone through the windows with a warm golden light that seemed to say, Welcome home, Sarah Noble. Sarah, riding on Thomas, looked down at her father, walking beside her. It had been a long day, and the trail through the forest had not been easy. We will spend the night here. Father? Yes, said her father, and you will sleep safely in a warm house. Sarah sighed with pleasure. Lift me down and let me walk, Father. Poor Thomas carries so much, he should not carry me too far. So they were walking, all 3 of them. When they came to the cabin, where the candlewood was lighted early, they knocked. The latch was lifted, and a woman stood in the doorway looking at them. She is not like my mother, Sarah thought. Her face is not like a mother's face. Still, the woman stood and looked at them. Good evening, Sarah's father said. I am John Noble from the Massachusetts colony, and this is my daughter, Sarah. We are on our way to New Milford, where I have bought land to build a house. Can you tell us where we could put up for the night? The woman looked at them, still without smiling. We have not much room, she said, but you may share what we have. My husband, Andrew Robinson, is away, and I had thought it might be wandering Indians. If you do not mind sleeping by the fire. We slept in the forest last night, John Noble said. Anything under a roof will seem fine to us. So they went in, and Sarah saw the children who were in the house. There were 4 of them, and fussing just as Sarah's mother might, 4 of them, 2 boys and 2 girls, all staring at Sarah with big round eyes. She began to feel shy. And now she was alone, for her father had gone to see to Thomas and to bring in Sarah's quilt for her to sleep on. Be seated, said Mistress Robinson. You are welcome to share what we have. Lemuel, Abigail, Robert, Mary, this is Sarah Noble. Sarah smiled timidly at the children. Take off your cloak, Sarah. But Sarah held it closely. If you don't mind, she said, I will keep it. I'm a little cold. The children laughed. Sarah sat down at the table, and in a few minutes her father was with them. Now, Sarah let the cloak fall back from her shoulders. I will hang it up for you, said Abigail. It is a beautiful warm cloak. Her fingers stroked the cloak lovingly as she hung it on a peg. And it is kind of red, she said. I would like to have a new cloak. You have no need of a new cloak, said her mother sharply. Now Mistress Robinson began to ask questions, and as John Noble answered, she began clucking and fussing just as Sarah's mother might have done. But somehow Sarah's mother fussed in a loving way. Taking this dear child into the wilderness with those heathen savages. Is she not more than 7? 8, said Sarah. Though my mother says I am not tall for my age. 8 then. What will you do there all alone? My father is with me, Sarah said. The children's eyes had grown wider and rounder. Now they began to laugh, and the younger ones pointed at Sarah. She's going to live away off in the woods. The Indians will eat you, Lemuel said, and smacked his lips loudly. They will chop off your head, little Robert added with a wide, innocent smile. They will not hurt me, Sarah said. My father says the Indians are friendly. They will skin you alive. That was Lemuel. I have heard that they are friendly, Mrs. Robertson put in quickly. The men who bought the land gave them a fair price and promised they might keep their right to fish in the great river, said John Noble. They will chop off your head, said Robert, and made chopping motions with his hands. Chop, 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 chop. What does that mean? Sarah felt a little sick. This was worse than wolves in the night. Her brothers were not like these boys, and she had heard about Indians. Perhaps these Indians had changed their minds about being friendly. She was glad when the children went to bed, all except Abigail, who spoke gently. Don't mind the boys, Abigail whispered. They tease. But Sarah did mind. If Stephen were with them, these boys would not dare to tease her, she thought. At last it was quiet. The children were all in bed, and Sarah lay on her quilt by the fire. Mistress Robinson covered her up warmly, and for a moment she seemed a little like Sarah's mother. Then, so young, she said. A great pity. I would like to have my cloak, if you please, said Sarah. But you are warm. I am a little cold now. Mrs. Robertson put the cloak over Sarah. Have it your way, child. But your blood must be thin. Sarah caught a fold of the cloak in her hand and held it tightly. As she closed her eyes, she could see pictures against the dark. They were not comfortable pictures. Before her were miles and miles of trees. Trees, dark and fearful. Trees crowding against each other. Trees on and on, more trees and more trees. Behind the trees, there were men moving. Were they Indians? She held the warm material of the cloak even more closely. Keep up your courage, Sarah Noble. Keep up your courage, she whispered to herself. But it was quite a long time before she slept. Chapter 3, Down the Long Hill. I'm going to pause here to explain to you. In this book, it was written again back in the 1950s. And there was a quote in here from the 1700s. Now, mind you, back then, they considered Indians in America as Indians, not Indians from India. So now, fast forward to our time. I think we're 2018, in the recent 2000s, I believe. We've considered Native Americans of the USA native to the land. And then Indians that have come over are from India. So there's a difference, okay? So what I'm reading here, just so you don't get confused, when I say Indians, I'm referring to the Native American Indians. Okay? Moving on to chapter 3. Down the long hill. Now they had come to the last day of the journey. The Indian trail had been narrow. The hills went up and down and up and down. Sarah and her father were tired, and even Thomas walked wearily. By late afternoon, they would be home. Home. No, it wasn't really home, just a place out in the wilderness. But after a while, it would be home. John Noble told Sarah it would be. His voice kept leading her on. Now we must be about 2 miles away. Now it is surely a mile, only a mile. Sarah's tired feet seemed to dance. She picked some wildflowers and stuck them in the harness behind Thomas's ear. You must be well dressed, Thomas, she said. We are coming home. She put a pink flower on her own dress, and her feet danced along again. Then suddenly she stopped. Father, if there is no house, where shall we live? Her father smiled down at her. I have told you. Then tell me again. I like to hear it. I hope to find a cave in the side of the hill, he said. I will make a hut for us and a fence around it. Then you and Thomas and I will live there until the house is built, though Thomas will have to help me with the building. Sarah laughed. Thomas cannot build a house. She had a funny picture in her mind of solemn, long-faced Thomas, her horse, carefully putting the logs in place. He can drag logs, her father said. Soon we shall have a fine house like Mistress Robinson's. No, said Sarah, like our own. And why not like Mistress Robinson's? Because there is no love in that house, said Sarah. You are too wise for your years, her father told her. Now they had come to the top of a long, steep hill, and they stopped at a place where there were not many trees, only bushes and coarse grass. This is one of the bare places, John Noble said. The Indians have cleared it for a hunting ground. Sarah looked around her fearfully. Behind the bushes, something stirred. A deer, said her father, and raised his gun. But Sarah clung to him. No, father, no, do not shoot it. But we must have meat. Not now, not now, Sarah begged. Its eyes are so gentle, father. Well, said John Noble, but he did not shoot. The deer rushed away, its white tail showing like a flag. Then Sarah drew a long breath and looked down. Sarah looked and looked, filled her mind with the beauty of it. It was a beauty that would say with, oh, did I miss something here? Bear with me, children. I think I skipped a page because it's old. There it is. I did. Sarah looked and looked and filled her mind with the beauty of it. It was a beauty that would stay with her all her life. Beyond the valley, there were green hills, and beyond and beyond and beyond, more hills of a strange, soft, misty blue. The trees were the dark green of firs and the light green of birches in springtime. Side note, firs and birches are trees. So you can Google those with your parents to find out what kind of trees there are, okay? To get an idea of what she's looking at. But I'll show you the picture. Okay. They were not like and now they were friendly. They were not like the angry dark trees that had seemed to stand in their path as they came. I do like it, Sarah said, and I do not see any Indians. The Indians are by the great river, her father said, and I have told you, Sarah, they are good Indians. But Lemuel said, John Noble took Sarah's small, cold hand in his. Mistress Robinson should teach her children to watch their words. She should watch her own. And there are people in this world who do not help others along the way, Sarah, while there are those who do. In our home, all will be treated with kindness. Always, Sarah. The Indians, too, and they will not harm us. Now, Sarah held her courage a little more firmly. She also held tightly to her father's hand, and so they came, with Thomas, the horse, down the long hill into the place that would be their home. Chapter 4. Before I go on, let's look at the picture. Chapter 4. Night in the Cave. It was a fair piece of land it was a fair piece of land with the trees already cleared. Men had come over from Milford on the coast to buy the land from the Indians. They had cleared it and divided it into plots for the houses. The land sloped down to the great river, and beyond the river were the Indian fields. It was in the hill across the river that Sarah and her father found a place hollowed out that would do for the night. And tomorrow I will make it larger and build a shed and a fence, John Noble said. They took from Thomas the heavy load and he had been carrying, bedding and pots, seeds for planting, tools, and warm clothes for the weather that would be coming. Sounds like winter's coming. Tonight, we do not need to eat that dry Johnny cake, Sarah said. It was easy to make a fire outdoors and to stir up a big pot of bean porridge. They ate there with the fire, with the only sound the evening talk of the birds. Later, when they had gone to bed, Sarah lay looking out at the fire which still glowed in the darkness. It was cold in the cave, but Sarah was comfortable. Under the quilt, she had wrapped herself in her warm cloak. Now the night sounds began. Sarah lay listening and listened. Was she keeping up her courage or was she being afraid? A branch snapped in the darkness. Father! Yes, Sarah. Do not be afraid, Father. I think an owl fell off a branch. There was a sound of small footsteps. Father! Yes, Sarah. That is perhaps a woodchuck. It cannot be Indians. Here they are here. No, of course not, John Noble smiled in the darkness. Then there came a strange odor that made Sarah choke. Father! Yes, Sarah. It is a skunk! A skunk. John Noble laughed out loud. Indeed it is, and a good thing I have you here, Sarah, to keep me from being afraid of all these strange visitors. Sarah was proud as proud could be. She was keeping up her courage, then and her father's too. That would please her mother. The night sounds wove themselves into a pleasant, comforting pattern. Sarah tried to keep her eyes open, but they kept closing. The wind in the trees seemed to put words to her thoughts. What was it saying? Keep up your courage, Sarah Noble. Keep up, keep. Then suddenly, in no time at all, it was morning and the sun was very bright. Chapter 5. Indians! For some days, John Noble was busy making the cave a good place to live. He built a shed with a strong fence around it. He made 2 rough beds of logs and a table and stools. Sarah took delight in it all. But after it was done, he said to her, I must begin the work on the house. It should be finished before winter. You will not mind staying here, Sarah, while Thomas and I work? Sarah did mind, but she did not say so. There were still the questions of Indians. On the hill and along the river, they could see the bark-covered houses. People moved about among the houses, but no Indians, and had come near the cave. She knew, though, that her father had spoken with some of the men. She did not want her father to go, but the house must be built. So she looked at him steadily and said, I will stay here, Father. But to herself, she was saying, keep up your courage, Sarah Noble, keep up your courage. Then John Noble and Thomas went across the river at a place where it was not deep. They went on up the hill, and Sarah was alone. For a little while, she did not know what to do. Then she took out the Bible that they had brought with them. It was a book full of wonderful stories. Which should, sorry, I'm getting tongue tied, kids. Which should she read? She liked the story of Sarah, whose namesake she was. Sarah had a son named Isaac. That was a scary story, but it came out all right in the end. Then there was the story of David and how he killed the giant. Oh, it was hard to choose. Sarah sat on a stool at the entrance to the shed, the Bible on her lap. So she had, I think I need some water. Excuse me, kids. Oops. Stirring up the water. Okay. Whew, getting tongue-tied. My mouth is getting dry. Okay. So let me back up. Then there was the story of David and how he killed the giant. Oh, it was hard to choose. Sarah sat on a stool at the entrance to the shed, the Bible on her lap. So she had often sat and read to her doll, Arabella, and to her little sister who never would listen. Here, there was not anyone to listen, not anyone, not even Arabella, for there had been no room to bring her. Oh, that's sad. The early June air was mild, but Sarah felt suddenly that she needed her cloak. So she got it and sat down again. No one to listen, but she would read to herself. She opened the Bible, and there was one of the stories she loved best of all. It was the story of the boy Samuel and of how the Lord called to him in the night. Sarah thought of the Lord as a kind old man, like her grandfather. Her mother said no one knew how he looked, but Sarah was sure she knew. She wished he would speak to her as he had to Samuel. That would be exciting. What in the world would she answer? Sarah read on, and then the sounds began. There was a rustling and a sound of feet coming quietly nearer and nearer. Sarah held tightly to the book and pulled her cloak around her. Rustle, rustle. Rustle, rustle. Suddenly, Sarah saw a bright eye peering at her through a clink in the log of the fence. Indians! They were all around her. Some of them crowded in the opening of the palisade, but they were young Indians, not any older than she was. Still, there were many of them. Sarah kept as still as a rabbit in danger. The children came in, creeping nearer, like small brown field mice until they were all around Sarah, looking at her. See that? It's a lot of them. Sarah closed the book and sat very still. Then she remembered what her father had said as they stood on the hill. Good morning, she said politely. You are welcome to our house. The Indian children stared at her. Then they came nearer. Soon Sarah found that all around her was a ring of children, standing and sitting, staring with their dark eyes. The spring sun shone on their brown bodies, and Sarah realized with a shock that they were not wearing clothes, unless you would call that one small piece of cloth clothing. Sarah, secure in dress and cloak and petticoats, felt very well dressed indeed. The children stared. Sarah began to feel as if their eyes were going all the way through her. Keep up your courage, Sarah Noble, she thought the words to herself. Here she was in the wilderness with all these Indians around her. She wished the Lord would speak to her as he had to young Samuel. He would tell her what to do. The Lord did not speak out loud, or at least Sarah did not hear him, but all at once she knew what to do. She opened the book and began to read to the children. They came nearer and nearer. They like the story, Sarah thought. They will not hurt me because they like the story. She read and read, and the children listened, because the sound of her voice was strange and pleasant. Then the story was over, and Sarah closed the Bible. Still, the children sat and stared and said not a word. My name, said Sarah clearly, is Sarah Noble. One of the boys said something. Then another spoke. Sarah did not understand a word of their strange talk. How foolish, she said aloud. Why can't you speak English? Perhaps some of her impatience crept into her voice, for the spell was broken. Like the deer when her father lifted the gun, the children were off and away. Sarah sat there by herself, and now she really felt alone. Oh, she said to herself, I wish they would come again. And she shook her head. For shame, Sarah Noble. I fear you were not polite. Perhaps they will never come back. Chapter 6. Friends. The Indian children did come, again and again. Sarah soon lost all fear of them, and they of her. At first the children all looked alike to Sarah. Then she began to know each one. Two of them she liked better than all the others. They were brother and sister, a tall, serious boy and a little girl with lively black eyes. Sometimes Sarah tried to read to them, but after the first time they did not listen. So Sarah tried teaching them words, pointing to the table, stool, fire. She would say the names slowly and clearly. Then the Indian children said, or tried to say the words, shouting with laughter when their tongues could not find a way around the strange words. They, in turn, showed her where the wild strawberries grew. So she went out and filled a basket with berries, which were like red jewels in the grass. When John Noble came home with a duck he had shot or a fish caught in the river, he would find ripe berries waiting too. They traded with the Indians for corn and ground it with the small mortar and pestle. Now, what's that, you ask? That's something you would use to, like in a bowl with a spoon, but this is like a round, ask your parents to help you with this. A pestle is pestle, is like a big thick spoon or rock type thing. And a mortar is like a bowl. You would take the corn and put it inside and mash it and ground it like that. I think that's about right. But we can check that. Moving on. So I'll reread that. They traded with the Indians for corn and ground it with a small mortar and pestle Thomas had brought in one of the saddlebags. Sarah made corn cakes with it, cooking them in the ashes, and all the time she thought of her mother's good bread, baked in the oven, if she had an oven. I need help to raise the logs for the house, John Noble said. There is a tall Indian who has said he will help me. I cannot say his name, so I will call him Tall John. He speaks a few words of English. Father, Sarah said, the Indian children point to their houses and want me to visit them. Should I go? John Noble did not answer at once. He sat with his head in his hands, saying not a word. This was his daughter, and he had brought her to this wild place. Often and often he had wondered if he had done right, and what, after all, did he know about these strange people? Sarah waited for her father to speak. At last he said, Tall John has 2 children, Sarah. I think they are among those who come here. I would trust you to go to the house of Tall John. Oh, said Sarah, it is Tall John's children that I like. So Sarah went often to the house of Tall John and his wife. She could not say the long, long names of the children. So she called the boy Small John and the girl Mary after her mother. The Indian children called her Sarah, for that was a name easy to say. Sarah, Sarah, Sarah. Their high, clear voices echoed up and down the valley as she played with them and learned their names. Sarah, 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 Sarah. Chapter 7. Keep up your courage. In the fall of the year, the house was almost finished. A little house, very small in the wilderness, and small too, beside the great maple trees that looked down on it. The house was brown, and the trees had put on their finest scarlet and yellow. Ooh, beautiful in autumn and fall. Sarah and her father, Tall John and Thomas, all stood and looked at the house. The big chimney promised warm winter days and nights. Outside there was a woodpile, neatly cut and stacked. It is a good house, said John Noble. Good, said Tall John, who never used 2 words where one would do, even if he spoke in his own language. It is a beautiful house, said Sarah. When can we live in it? And when will Mother come, and Stephen and Hannah? Look. Her father did not answer her at once. He looked at Tall John. Tall John nodded. Then Sarah's father took both her hands in his and looked down into her eyes. Sarah, he said, you have been brave, and now you will have to be braver. I must go to fetch your mother and the children. It is too far for you to go, and it will be better if you stay here. Wow. Let's read that again, kids, because this is of utmost importance to understand just how her father was feeling at this moment. Her father did not answer her at once. He looked at Tall John. Tall John nodded. Then Sarah's father took her hands in his and looked down into her eyes. Sarah, he said, you have been brave, and now you will have to be braver. I must go fetch your mother and the children. It is too far for you to go, and it will be better if you stay here. How old is Sarah again? 8. Stay here? Alone? I am afraid. She heard herself say afraid, and it was the first time she had said that word out loud. I have lost my courage, said Sarah Noble. To be afraid and to be brave is the best courage of all, said her father. But you need not be afraid, and you will not be alone. Dry your tears, Sarah. Tall John and his squaw will take care of you. Squaw meaning wife. You mean, said Sarah, not quite believing the words, you mean I am to live with the Indians? That is what I mean, her father said. Does it seem very hard to you? Sarah thought it over. The Indian children were her friends. She loved Tall John and his squaw, but to stay with them, to live in their house, while her father was away, that was quite another matter. And again, Sarah was afraid, but she knew that Thomas would be, but she knew that Thomas would be needed to carry goods when her father brought the family back, Thomas and other horses. Of course, there would be no place for Sarah to ride. The next morning, Sarah was very quiet as she stirred the mush for breakfast. Sarah, said her father, you will be safe with Tall John and his family. But, said Sarah, what if the Indians from the north come? Tall John is afraid of them. The Indians have not come from the north for a long time, her father said. You know the Indians on Guarding Hill keep watch all the time. I would not leave you, Sarah, if I did not think it was safe. But to himself he said, am I doing right to leave her? There was worry in his mind. The frost was on the ground when Sarah stood, holding Tall John's hand to watch her father start on his journey. Her cloak was wrapped tightly around her. She was not saying anything, but her busy was making pictures. Trees, dark trees, narrow paths through the forest, wolves, bears. Suppose her father never came back and she had to live with the Indians all her life. Now her father was mounting Thomas. Sarah patted the horse's nose. His long, solemn face seemed suddenly very dear to her. Can you picture that, being left alone at 8 years old with a strange family in the wilderness? John Noble rode quickly away, turning once, twice, 3 times, to wave to a very small girl in a red-brown cloak. Keep up your courage, Sarah Noble. Now he was far away, farther away. The trees hid him and he was out of sight. Keep up your courage, Sarah Noble. Sarah's fingers were cold in Tall John's hand, and the tears she had been holding back splashed on her cloak. Tall John swung her up on his shoulder. Then they went, with long strides, down the hill, across the river, to Tall John's house. There's Tall John's house. Chapter 8. In the Indian house, the first night was the strangest. All day Sarah had played with the children. They did not speak in the same words, but somehow they understood each other. When they couldn't understand, it did not seem to matter. Friends have ways of speaking without words. But darkness came early, and Sarah found herself in the house with Tall John and his family. How she longed for her own family. The evening meal was not what Sarah was used to. The Indians ate with their hands, and they had no plates. Still, the meat tasted good, and Tall John's wife had cooked it. Sarah liked cooking, but there were times when she tired of it. She ate the food and enjoyed it. When bedtime came, Sarah opened the bag she had packed so neatly, the bag that had come all the way from home on the willing back of Thomas. The children watched eagerly. What magic was Sarah going to take out of the bag? But there was no magic, only a long, warm nightgown and a comb. The children watched, interested and puzzled, as Sarah put on the nightgown. Their eyes never left her as she combed her long hair. That long brown hair of Sarah's, it was like the silk on the corn in the late summer. The children came near and touched it. Then Sarah knelt by the side of the low bed covered with furs to say her prayers, as she always did. She said them aloud, and as she had done with her father, was there to listen. The tears came again, for it was a lonely business. God bless my father and my mother and my brothers and sisters. Make the baby strong and well. Keep keep my father safe and bring him back to me. She stopped for a minute, partly because her voice was choked, but partly because she did not know if it was right to pray for a horse. Then she went on, and keep Thomas safe on the way, and keep me safe. And now she really had to stop and think. Was it right to pray for the Indians? Did the Lord take care of Indians? She could only ask him and see. Please, God, if you take care of the Indians too, bless Tall John and his wife, and Small John and Mary, forever and ever. Amen. The children heard their names and looked at their father with a question in their eyes. She speaks with her great spirit, their father said, as we speak with our great spirit. Good, said Small John, who was like his father in not wasting words. Chapter 9, Night of Fear. October days were warm and sunny. The Indian women spread the corn out to dry. At night, Sarah helped them to cover it carefully so the heavy dew would not wet it. There were many things to do. Tall John's wife taught Sarah how to weave a basket. And because Sarah's clothes were stiff and heavy, the Indian woman made her clothes of deerskin, such as the Indians wore when the days grew colder. She also made a pair of deerskin moccasins. Sarah's feet felt light and free. She walked softly as the Indian children did. Often she thought of her family. Were they on the way? Would Hannah and Margaret be afraid of wolves? Stephen would not be, and the baby was too young to know about the danger. There was nothing, she thought, to be afraid of here with Tall John and his family, but there was. The pleasant, quiet days came to an end, and all at once Sarah felt that there was fear and disturbance in the air. More Indians kept watch on Guarding Hill. The Indians from the north must be coming. So Sarah scarcely knew whether to sleep at night. Suppose. But tired from long days, in the sun she slept at last, always with a fold of her cloak caught in her hand. And before she slept, she said to herself, keep up your courage, Sarah Noble. Keep up your courage. Once in the night, she wakened and listened. Tall John had told her, partly in words and partly by signs, that all along the great river there were hills like Guarding Hill, where men kept watch. If the Indians from the north were coming, the word would be passed from hill to hill by calling, and the villages would be ready. Sarah listened and listened. Once she seemed to hear a long, low wailing. Was this the signal? Were the Indians coming down from the north? She waited for the village to awaken, but everything was still. In the darkness, she could hear even sleep. In the darkness, she could hear the even sleep breathing of Tall John and his wife, of Small John and Mary. Why? It's nothing but a wolf. Why? It's nothing but a wolf. Look at that. It's the wolf, said Sarah. Soon her heart beat quietly, and she too was breathing evenly in sleep. In the morning, Tall John told her that there had been fear, but the danger had passed. The river villages would not be raided. So, forgetting all her fears of the night before, Sarah played with the other children. It was such a charming game they played in the warm sunshine. Taking off all their moccasins, they placed them in a row, then hid a pebble in one. Sarah was pleased when it came her turn to guess, and she guessed right. The pebble was in her own shoe. In the middle of the game, she turned suddenly, feeling that someone was watching her. Here's the moccasin. There we go. Sorry about that. And it was her father. Wait, oh, this is exciting. She was feeling that someone was watching her. And it was her father, John Noble, stood there, saying not a word. His eyes crinkled at the corners, the way they did when he was amused. And he said, "Sarah, I had thought you were one of the Indian children." "Father," said Sarah and ran to him. "Has my mother come?" "We are all here now," said her father. "I have come to take you home. But, daughter, I think it would be well to put on your own clothes, or your mother will surely not know you." Just remember, she's wearing the moccasins and the warm clothes that her family, her Indian family, was watching over her with. Okay, so Sarah put on your clothes. So Sarah put on her clothes, piece by stiff piece. She now thought of buttons as tiresome, and as far as petticoats, the moccasins she kept on, for her feet refused to go into those heavy leather shoes. When she was ready to leave, she saw Tall John looking sadly at her. "You go, Sarah," he said. "I must," said Sarah. "My mother is here." Tall John said nothing, but swung Sarah up on his shoulder, as he had done many times before. Gave her a hug. Chapter 10. Sarah goes home. Over the river they went, with Sarah riding on Tall John's shoulder. Only once, she looked back at the Indian house. They had been kind to her, but now she was going home. The words sounded so fine that she said them over and over to herself as Tall John waded carefully through the water. Going home, going home, going home. Would her mother know her? Tall and sun-browned? Would baby Mabel know her? Had maybe Mabel grown? Was she stronger? She had been such a fretful, sickly baby. Now they were going up the hill, and the brown log house was in sight. There was someone standing in the doorway, someone in a blue dress. Yes, it was her mother. It really and truly was Sarah's mother. Uh-oh, the page gets stuck. And yes, she was holding the baby in her arms. Beside her were Stephen and Mary and Hannah and little Margaret. Sarah almost jumped from Tall John's shoulder. "Easy now, Sarah," her father said. "You will be there soon enough. Hurry, Tall John, hurry. Take longer steps. Hurry, Tall John, my mother's waiting." Tall John, feeling the quivers of excitement that raced through Sarah's body, set her down. "You go now," he said, "my daughter." Then he turned and went back toward his own house, and Sarah walked swiftly and softly to her home. Her mother had put the baby on the ground. Wonder of wonders, Mabel was taking a few unsteady steps, holding her mother's hands. Sarah knelt and held out her arms, and the baby came into them. Oh, Sarah could feel the little body, firm and strong. If the baby had taken the long journey earlier, it might have not. Ooh, sorry. If the baby had taken the long journey earlier, it might not have been that way. Now Sarah's mother held them both close together to her. Sarah, Sarah, how have you grown, child? How brown you are. And in the same breath, what are those outlandish things you're wearing on your feet? Now Sarah knew that she was home. It was a day of happiness and of work for the family. There were goods to be unpacked and places to be found for them. Thomas had brought Sarah's own little stool. She carried it at once to the fireplace. Mother, she said, almost afraid to ask the question, did you bring Arabella? Or was there no room for her? She is here, her mother said. We could not leave her behind, though to be sure I thought you might have outgrown her, and she might be for Margaret. Arabella is my child, said Sarah, and I have not outgrown her. Chapter 11, Night in the Log House. Night in the Log House. Here we go. In the evening, when the baby and Margaret were asleep, Sarah and her mother and father and the older children sat by the fire. It was warm and cozy in the little house. I cannot think, Sarah's mother said, how your father could leave you alone with those savages. I had words with him when he came, but they are not savages, Sarah said. They are our friends, and Tall John's wife takes good care of her children. Indeed, said John Noble. That is true. And when I came back, I found Sarah as clean and well dressed as when I left her. Tall John's wife is almost as careful as you, Mary. Sarah's mother did not believe a word of it. that she would have to see for herself. If she could even bring herself to look into one of those queer wigwams. A wigwam, side note, is like a house, like a tent, a teepee type thing that the Native Americans lived in. No Indian mother could be as good a mother as she was, and certainly not as good as a housekeeper. I must put Arabella to bed, said Sarah. They could hear her talking to the dog. Do not be afraid, Arabella, she said. It is safe here. These Indians are our friends, and they will tell us if the Indians from the north are coming. Sleep well, my dear. Keep up your courage, Arabella. Keep up your courage. Sarah's father smiled at her mother. It is good, he said, to see that Sarah is a little girl again. She has had in these months to be too much of a woman. Sarah, hearing, came back. I am not a little girl now, she said, stretching to her full height. See, I am tall and almost 9 years old. Nearly a woman. And so you are, her mother told her. When I am a grown woman, Sarah said, I shall be a mother and have 12 children. And maybe, she added, I will be a school teacher. I taught the Indian children. We shall see, her mother said. But if you are to be a teacher, you will have to start again with your reading and writing. And Sarah, it is time for bed. There had been nights when Sarah had not liked to hear the words time for bed. Now she loved the sound of her mother's voice saying them. That night, Sarah slept warm and under the quilts. On a peg nearby hung her cloak, and she did not need it. She had kept up her courage, and it was something that would be always with her, always, even when the cloak was all worn out. Tonight, the pictures in her mind were comfortable ones. Home, family, the fireside, and a door securely fastened. The light from the fire made pleasant patterns in the darkness. Sarah lay quietly, and the wind in the trees sang her to sleep. There's her cloak. The end. I'm going to read the author's note to you, and then we'll talk about the book in just a second. Author's note. This is a true story, though I have had to imagine many of the details. Sarah Noble was a real little girl who came in 1707 to cook for her father while he built the first house in New Milford. Most of the New Milford settlers came from Milford, Connecticut, but John Noble came from Westfield, Massachusetts, having bought a share of land from one of the Milford men. The story happened in Connecticut, but it might have happened in many other places in America. Stories like this of faith and courage and friendship live a long time and are told and retold. The settlers of New Milford dealt fairly with the Indians, according to the standards of their time, and were always friendly with them. Sometimes the story is told that John Noble left Sarah with the Indians while he went to guide some men to Albany. I have preferred to suppose that he went to bring, or at least to meet, the rest of the family. This seems more plausible. When Sarah grew up, she taught what was probably the first school in the town. She also married, as in the story she says she will. The records say, too, that Sarah continued to be friendly with the tall Indian who loved her as he did his own children, Tall John. Beautiful story about courage. Having courage in moments of uncertainty and when you feel fearful, afraid, nervous, tentative. You know, those moments when your parents tell you, or whoever's a guardian of you, that we have to go somewhere new, or we're going to go do something different outside of what we normally do, or go visit places that you've never been to before, and you feel nervous and sometimes excited, anxious. At those times, it's important to feel courage. And if you have to take something familiar that makes you feel more strong and fearless, then do that. Like your favorite book, your favorite doll, teddy bear, your favorite cloak that your mom or dad or grandmother may have given you, or aunt. Sometimes people take headphones that was given to them or borrowed that was from someone they love, that makes them feel one with them. Something that makes you feel safe. So don't be afraid of change, new things. Adventures are wonderful to have. And also among those adventures, when you meet new people, always be polite, pleasant, and loving and kind. That's what makes the world go around. Being like the Mistress Robinson, she had a bit of fear and, cynicism in her. She was untrustworthy. She felt untrustworthy of the Indians. Let's put it that way. It was hard for her to trust what she didn't know. So let's learn to be more trusting, polite, and kind, and others will do the same for us. Okay? All right. I hope I helped you with the reading of this story, The Courage of Sarah Noble, as you go about your new year in 2019 that's coming up just in a couple of days. It's going to be something new and adventurous for us to enjoy. And I pray that you all will live long and prosper, as Spock would say. Or Mork and Mindy, nano, date, if you Google Mork and Mindy with Star Trek. Hey. And may the force be with you. for us Star Wars fans as well. Okay, yes, watch the first Star Wars and Star Trek. I'm a big fan of both. Battlestar Galactica. Google that one and see if you can find it. You will enjoy Battlestar Galactica. Let me tell you. Stormtroopers. Troopers. Oh, let's scale it back a little bit. But yeah, okay. All right, kids and family and friends and parents. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to bring more reading to you. And I will try to change it up a bit and have a little bit more fun with it, so that it'll be more enjoyable. All right, take care. Thank you. Oh, I'm back. One more thing. Please hit subscribe if you want to, get more stories to let me know that you liked it or give me a thumbs up. I would appreciate that. Thank you. Bye.